Yoruba, who's a youth policy analyst, and we had extended an invite to Alex Matere, who's a youth policy enthusiast, had just confirmed, but he's a no-show. But the show must go on. Right, ladies and gentlemen? So let's get right into it. Muthiora, right before the break, we were just interrogating the appointment of Chiloba as the Director General of the Communications Authority. Many might say the timing is suspicious, but according to the Communications Authority, it was all done through merit. And I get why it's suspicious, because according to the work that falls under the Communications Authority, telecommunication services, which comprises network providers from whom IEBC procures services to transmit election results from polling stations. And you well know the issues when it comes, not just the voting, but the transmission of results. That's where the issue is at times when we're in the general election, in the thick of it. So what's your reaction to Chiloba's appointment?
The appointment is suspect. Suspect, especially if we look at Chiloba's background. He's someone who's coming from a job at the IEBC that was not properly executed. He was in charge of an election that was declared invalid, null and void. He basically left IEBC in shambles, and now he's been washed clean, he's been found to be competent, and he's been assigned a new role at a very critical institution. I find it suspect because Communications Authority is the body that will play a key role in the forthcoming elections. And Chiloba, being a person from an electoral background, is someone we cannot just wish away that he will not have any influence. Look at it this way. IEBC will, of course, be in charge of the official elections process. But when it comes to communicating results, we have had media houses say they would want to be part of the tallying process. And in fact, some media houses have said they will run almost a parallel tallying center. Now, with Chiloba in charge of communications, we may even have a scenario where some stations are banned from beaming results, or some stations may contravene the rules and be allowed to carry a narrative to suit certain candidates. So this is someone who has been in the elections arena, and given the fact that we are approaching a very heated political season, we cannot look at it innocently. It would be naive to assume that out of the 50 people who applied for the job, 53, and the 20 that were shortlisted, and I have looked at the pedigree of those candidates, some of them are more competent, more qualified, more experienced than Ezra Chiloba, yet he's the one that was picked for the job. So it would be naive to assume that he was picked only due to his competence and qualifications.
Okay, interesting developments, and the conversation definitely continues, even as I think it's page 8 of the Standard highlights Chiloba's pledge in terms of friendly rules for up-to-date technology come 2022. So more details right there. But I'd like us to shift focus to Matters Youth. Gloria, Matters Youth are really close to your heart. And I don't know if you came across that particular tweet by Rungu Nyakera, who was present during that particular Mount Kenya Foundation meeting at Safari Park that was conducted just Tuesday. And he had this to say: the consultative meeting did not entertain a single question or comment from attendees. No youth was allowed to speak at the event that brought together tycoons from the region, and ODM leader Raila Odinga as the chief guest. Perhaps your reaction to that particular tweet, especially when it comes to the youth and claiming their space in the national political discourse. What's your reaction to that briefly?
Former PS Irungu Nyakera is actually personally a good friend of mine. We've actually served in the same institution under youth agenda called Global Youth Parliament, where I was a country coordinator and he was sitting in the advisory board. And, you know, when you see certain people speaking about youth matters, I would say you have to literally take it as the gospel. It is not the first time that ODM has been seen, or Raila Odinga has been seen to marginalize the youth, because we know that even on the party structures, they have the youth as a sort of just a PR kind of statement, public relations, just to show that, yes, you know, this also is a party that looks after the youth. But in the real sense, when you go down to the grassroots and to the ground on whether the youth have influence within those spaces, they don't. So when I read his tweet, and also, and first of all, I would say, as a person who was sitting in there, I don't think he could be lying. Why would he lie about certain things, like saying that no youth was allowed to speak? Actually, no youth was allowed to speak in that forum. And it starts from there. It starts from this whole marginalization and lack of participation of the youth in politics and in governance, starts from a mere fact that as the youth, they are not even considered valid enough or of influence enough to be given a platform, or even to sort of be given a chance to, you know, articulate their issues. So the fact that no youth was allowed to speak, for me, I don't think he was lying about that. I wasn't there, but reading his tweet, for me, that was a red flag. And you know, Jesse, youth, you can't say that the youth do not want to participate in politics. You can't say that the youth have no passion for politics. I've said this before. Any political party, when they need the heavyweight work done, they call upon the youth. You know, personally, I'm a member of UDA, and as a new party, one of the things that you require to do is ensure you have presence nationally in all the different counties down to the ward level. And that is when you see the party actually calling upon the youth, saying, you know, we need to have visibility, go and mobilize people, whether it is the women or who. So the youth are actually very, very instrumental in terms of the party affairs. But when it comes to now decision-making, influence, when it comes to the high-level things that actually matter, we are marginalized. And so for me, for this whole idea that you will only bring the youth on board when you need them to go and get their hands dirty. Okay. You only bring the youth on board when you need to tick a box under IEBC or under, you know, political parties acts or whatever. That you'll only need to bring the youth when you want to appear as though you are, you know, appealing to 75% of the voter base. Then for me, I think we need to move from that. And allow me to speak to the youth at this moment who are actually actively engaged in politics and who want to have a career in politics. I would say you need to seriously think when you're joining a political party. You need to seriously think and analyze. Is this a political party that actually pushes for the youth agenda? And I'm not talking about in terms of just books. I'm talking about if you join that political party and you're an aspiring MCA or MP or governor or even a presidential candidate as we have in studio, ask yourself, are you actually going to be allowed a fair platform of competition, even when it comes to the party primaries? Are they actually going to say, you know, this is not about Gloria being young, so Gloria, you're too young, when ngoja tukupe nomination under the youth. Okay. But are they actually going to say that this is a person who we consider has a chance and actually sort of push you there? So for me, I think, I do believe Nyakera's tweet. Having seen him and worked with him in the youth space and the Global Youth Parliament, he definitely has the youth agenda at heart. All right. And for me, I would ask ODM to just pull up their socks and actually engage the youth where it matters. Okay, so as we continue with this discussion, Muthiora, perhaps you can also take a look at what happened according to the former PS in terms of that particular meeting. As you react to that, we have the president on record mentioning akipe vijana kazi, you know what happens. A couple of issues to do with corruption might follow thereafter. So is it integrity issues that actually hold us back as youth in terms of claiming these political positions at the end of the day? Is it our own doing? That's what I'm trying to achieve with this question. Is it our own doing?
At every opportunity, I have had to respond to the president's assertion that the youth have let him down. I have dismissed those assertions with the contempt they deserve because it's not true. There are a few Kenyan youth who have done things they shouldn't have done, but majority of Kenyan youth are people of integrity, hardworking, passionate, enthusiastic, and true patriots. It's disappointing that at a very important forum such as the one that happened with the Mount Kenya Foundation, the youth were not duly represented. And that goes to show what Kenya's problem is, and that is the youth are a marginalized majority, an oxymoron, which is something we must seek to cure. The people who own capital, regardless of how they got it, do not believe that the youth have more to offer beyond the brute force. Yes, we can think for them, but then we only belong to some corner. At the table where decisions are made, we are not welcome. And my message to the Kenyan young people is that a time has arrived when we need to stop wanting to be included at that table. We have to set up our own table and dictate how things should be run. We can do a good job, and I know we will do a good job because there are a number of young people who are rising up. Let's believe in ourselves. Let us show that we can lead, because we can. We've been doing it in a lot of sectors. We've been working for these owners of capital and delivering results for them. Let us now reimagine a nation where we, the key stakeholders, hold the reins. We are fully in control. Only then shall we be taken seriously. You will not have room in the established parties. I can guarantee you that. It's a path I tried. So do not put your hopes up. Let us by all means invade those spaces and try to push our agenda. But when you meet a brick wall, be flexible enough to come back and explore the horizon, because there abound many opportunities.
Okay.
There are newer political parties that are true to their calling, that believe in ideologies that can transform this nation. The future belongs to us, but we must be brave, we must be bold, and we must acknowledge that the problems that plague this nation were caused by people who belong to that group that is now meeting these top political contenders. We have the solutions.
Okay.
But we must know where the problem really lies. And it's with those people, it's with those established political formations.
We might have the solutions, Muthiora, but we are an underrepresented majority. And that begs the question of youth supporting their own. Because I'm looking at data right now. People below the age of 35 comprise 75.1% of the population. And ironically, when we take a look at the current parliament, 27 members of parliament, or approximately 6.47%, are those under the age of 35, out of a total of 417 members of parliament. So, Gloria, as much as we're shouting at the top of the hill, it takes this majority to elect a representation that sort of mirrors what they think. And what's the missing link at the end of the day? Why don't the youth support their own? And I'm equally short of asking, why don't the women support their own? Because it's equally a question that is usually fronted when it comes to this gender parity debate.
All those statements are not true. The data you read, 75.1% of the population is youth. That's about 35 million, because we are looking at around 47 up to 50 million. And to say that they do not support their own, the youth do not support their own and do not elect their own, you have to ask yourself, in the last general election, how many youthful candidates did we have for the electoral now to say, we actually have an option. We are going to vote for this person because they are youth. And then from there, you can actually compare the data and say the youth do not support the youth. As at now, that data is actually not correct because you cannot, in the past election, we had very few youthful aspirants who managed to get to the ballot. You know, aspiring is one thing, but there are so many challenges between your aspirations and actually getting to the ballot and participating in that elective process. So if you compare those two and you look at the outcome of, you say 6 point something percent, 27 members of parliament, then you would say that the youth indeed vote for the youth. When you look at the presidential aspirants currently, right now, how many youthful presidential aspirants do we have now for you to say that the youth actually have an option, they have youthful options within the youth category, and now we can say, let us watch how their voting patterns will be. More often than not, we will have one or two presidential aspirants who fall under the youth category, like now we have Modiora. So I think we have actually made some strides in terms of pushing for the youth agenda and pushing to have representative in the National Assembly and in the Senate and to some extent in the executive. But what I would say, it's not an issue of the youth supporting the youth. It's also an issue of the youth stepping forward and saying that I'm actually going to vie for a seat. I'm actually going to present myself to the electorate, and not only just present yourself as the youth, because Jesse, you can't just come and say, hey, I'm Gloria, I fall under the youth category, so you are going to vote me as the member of parliament of overseas constituency because I'm youth. No, because the same youth are also looking for youthful leaders who are going to push the youth agenda, economic empowerment, representation, and stuff like that. And if you don't have a manifesto, or if you don't have promises or objectives, goals that will actually empower the youth, it doesn't matter if you're 19 years old and you vie. If you don't actually give the electorate some hope, something that promise them some sort of change, then they're not going to vote for you. And that's the country that we live in. So I would say, in terms of, Modiora said something that I would like to reiterate, that you know, in these old parties, you're not going to forget about it. You know, we've tried, they are so fixated in their own kind of ideologies or whatnot, and they do not have room for you. Mm-hmm. To some extent, that is true. And when he says that it is time for the youth to now create their own table, I mean, that's a little bit of theoretical. We cannot create our own table. We must sit on the table of policy and governance that actually drives this country. But what I would say is, there are newer parties, there are newer political parties, there are newer formations. You know, even if you look at the One Kenya Alliance, for instance, it's a formation that sort of is trying to push the youth agenda. There are newer political parties. I am a member of UDA, and I can tell you that in that party, we strive to push the youth agenda, and that's one of the reasons, other than the women agenda, that's one of the reasons that I'm there. And I would say that we have to be intentional as youth. As much as we are saying we are not being involved, we are not being included. For instance, when Irungu Nyakera was sitting in that gathering where Raila Odinga was being endorsed and given support by the Mount Kenya Foundation, okay, he could have stood and grabbed the mic, you know, for instance, walk to the stage and say, hey, I have noted there are no youth here, and I would like to say a word or two. I don't think anybody would have stopped him, considering he's a former permanent secretary. So sometimes it also takes a level of, let me say, aggression to actually remind people that we are here, we exist, and you're going to listen to us.
Okay, interesting right there. So Modiora, as you heard your voice, approximately 6 more new voters, or 6 million new voters, are set to be added to the voters register as IEBC starts its voter registration exercise on the 4th of October. And what would be safe to assume that majority of this are the youthful population who have just attained that criteria to, you know, cast the ballot. So at the end of the day, when criticism might be placed in terms of not being loud enough in terms of claiming our space, perhaps, we take a look at the public participation that occurs in Parliament and county assemblies, one might question the participation of youth up front. So at the end of the day, What's the message out there, despite the challenges that might exist in these big political parties, as you've mentioned? How do we maneuver this to ensure that representation is not lackluster, you know?
Well, Kenyan youth must get involved in politics, participate in the processes. Like we are headed into a mass voter registration exercise. I'm urging anyone who does not have a voter's card to get one. And it's been projected that we are likely to have over 6 million new voters in the next election cycle. I'm praying that these new voters that join the roll do not just join it to have a card for their wallet, but then to use it to transform this nation. Votes count. Your vote is important for Kenya. Now, that said, I mentioned that you, the Kenyan youth and young people, are not welcome at those old political formations. Uko hamtatambuliwa. Please look for spaces where you are appreciated. There is a way those formations work, and when you join them, there is a space they tell you you belong. You are outsiders in the political process and machination in Kenya. So if you're going to change things, you must not conform to the way that things have been done before. You must be open and willing to try a new way, to build a new world order for this nation. That's how things are going to change. But that will only be possible if you're politically engaged, if you're bold, and above all, we have to be different. Integrity is a component that has lacked in the leadership of this nation. We have not had ample opportunity to serve, which to some extent gives us a clean record. Let us look to keep that record clean. Let us be people who do not condone corruption. Let us be people who go out of the way to serve humanity. Let us make Kenyans believe that the youth and the young Kenyans are here and are ready to serve, because we know how things have been, we know how things are, we know how things can be. Let us reconcile all these to make a great Kenya that's different from what we have today.
Well, you know what they say, the future is ours. So, Gloria Robert, as we finalize on this, especially on that clean record sentiment Muthiora has just given, at times, you know, the society looks at the older guard, the older generation, as a safe pair of hands, you know, despite the turmoil that might go through a country, you know, they're the safe pair of hands, well experienced, and that might be able to steer the country off certain challenges. So how do we change this persuasion that is in the society right now?
Jesse, first of all, anyone who actually believes that playing safe is actually in the interest of the people is wrong. Playing safe doesn't, you risk nothing, you gain nothing. So this whole idea of the older generation are a safe pair of hands and they can safely take this country to safe havens, that doesn't, I mean, look at where we are now. Look at our GDP, look at where we are economically. That is about playing safe, really. I think the youth should be looked at as fresh energy with new innovative ideas to how we are going to solve the current problems of this country. And we should be looked at as those people who dare to actually achieve something, who dare to risk something, because they know that the bigger the risk, the bigger the what? The benefits, or the bigger the outcome. So for me, there are so many advantages of having youth leaders in office. There are so many advantages of having the youth participate in all these processes, whether electoral processes or processes within governance, because they bring a perspective that a lot of people actually would not think about. They bring a perspective which sort of is, you would say, risky, but at the end of the day, that is probably what we need to do to change this country. So I would say the youth leadership in this country needs to wake up.
Okay.
And me being part of them, we need to literally steer the youth to a place where we must refuse to be sidelined. We must refuse to be ignored. This also means that you don't go to a sitting and you watch them participate in a whole process where the youth are not involved when you're sitting in there. You have to literally, if they are not going to give you a seat at that table, you have to go and stand on the table and scream if you have to. Because at the end of the day, it takes some level of aggression from us as well to get to those tables. And, you know, the first step, if you're going to change anything in this country, is to actually get to the decision-making table. So that is my take on youth participation in politics and in governance.
Okay, so we need to claim our space in youth participation and governance in the country. So it's bound to get heated even as we get closer to the 2022 general election. I hope the great nationhood party of Kenya will have space for the youth, as Gloria Roba has mentioned, their side does as well. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Muthiora Kariara right there, the party leader of the great nationhood party of Kenya. Thanks for your time and your input right here as we deliberated matters making headlines. Equally, those matters touching on youth and politics in the country. Gloria Roba joining us via way of Zoom, youth policy analyst. Thanks for your time, always a pleasure.